Hi folks, this is video number 175 and the title is My Winchester Model 70 30-06. If you have followed my stories, you know I worked on the neighboring farms. I made my spending money milking cows and harvesting hay and corn, etc. I started pulling hay wagons when I was 11. My pay was usually $1 an hour. Gas was only around 15 cents a gallon in those days. I had hunted with my dad a few times on our hill. He taught me how to handle the old Stevens 410 shotgun safely. This was before hunter education became mandatory. I hunted alone for squirrels and grouse. I actually caught a few grouse unaware of my presence and was able to harvest them as they scratched around on the ground. I had saved up and told Dad I wanted to get a rifle to hunt deer. Every shooting article I read always compared every caliber of discussion to the 30-06 round. It seemed to be the gold standard. I figured, why mess with other calibers and buy the one to which all others are compared? Off to the Scranton Sears store we went. I was 12. There was no anti-gun talk back then. You could get one in the mail. I guess the antis grew after JFK was shot, and Reagan along with his advisor Jim Brady. Pretty quick we had the Brady Bill and the formulation of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and all the paperwork and job justification regulations to go with a government agency. I remember Dad buying a British .303 World War II surplus rifle out of a barrel of them near the door of the Nicholson Western Auto. It only cost $3. It was fully stocked up to the front sight. The rear sight flipped up from a peep to another peep, adjustable out to 1,000 yards. I used to sit on the porch to shoot at woodchucks in the upper right corner side hill at 300 yards. My Model 70 always grouped low and left. I later figured out the stock was a bit short for me. I installed high-rise mounts so I could still see the buckhorns and put a 3x9x40 scope on it. I was able to adjust the scope to overcome that problem. I hunted some, but with taking college classes from 3 to 6 after high school, I didn't get out much. I was home on leave for a few days, so I went to Ellsworth's Corner Store in Fleetville and bought my license. I walked my old route up and around the hill. I came out into the old pasture behind a neighbor's house. He had strung an electric fence around the pasture. I looked around but saw nothing. I unloaded my rifle and hopped the fence. I was right in the middle of the pasture, about 100 yards from either house. It was then I heard galloping hooves. I turned around and a horse was charging me at full run, head low and mouth open. I had just finished a few days of very intense bayonet training. I knew I couldn't outrun a horse, and my gun was empty. So I stood my ground. I timed my pivot and horizontal butt stroke. I nailed that horse on the side of his head. He was running at me so fast that he did 3 complete forward rolls. He struggled some and stood up. His lower jaw looked like a bag of rocks. The neighbor came out about that time. He walked down, had his 1911 .45 in his belt. I apologized, but he told me not to worry about it. He said, and I quote, "The son of a bitch bit me last week." He led the horse into the swamp. I did a number on my rifle, too. The stock split down the middle to the cheek piece and splintered off to the side. I ordered a new stock. It cost $70. It came with a sprayed-on finish. I wasn't pleased with it. I removed the finish to bare wood. I left it on the grip and 4-in checkering. Next was 5 or 6 applications of linseed oil. I let each one dry before the next. It came out pretty nice. As time marched on, I served in the Army. I'm married, had 2 boys, a house, and a pretty good job. I had permission to hunt a property down by the river in Vosburg. On stand, hunting alone, a really nice buck started walking left to right in front of me. When there was a tree blocking his view, I raised up my trusty Model 70 and looked through the scope. What I saw looked like a white lampshade with crosshairs on it. The scope had fogged. I went to the buckhorn. I shot at that deer 5 times. I made a lot of firewood. The worst part was, the deer didn't run. He just walked away. I guess he figured he was safe with all the firewood stacking up behind him. I took my gun to George LeBar. He had a little gun shop in his basement. His house was in the corner of Vosburg Road and Route 6. George put on a new scope and bore-sighted it. I had no place to fine-tune it, so the next day I went back to Vosburg. This time, I was taking a slow walk along the river. It was a nice day, and I was kind of wishing I brought a pole. There was an island just a few yards from shore. I looked across the island and the river. It was about 200 yards or so. Holy smoke, there was a buck looking at me. You could tell his front left leg was broken. I pulled up and shot. His front right leg was on my side. That shot broke his other leg, other front leg. He wasn't going anywhere. So I found a gravel bar to the island. Having crossed the island, now the distance was about 100 yards. There was a fallen tree that was a perfect rest for my next shot. The only trouble was, I couldn't spot the deer. Using the scope, I panned the far side back and forth about 3 times before I spotted him nestled low next to a slab rock. The deer was also at the base of a cliff, about 300 feet up. He wasn't going anywhere. I knelt down with my gun on the log and touched off a shot aimed directly at the deer's heart and lung area. The bullet hit about 2 feet above his head. Well, I would have to use Kentucky windage, as the bore sighting wasn't close. The deer's broken front leg was hanging straight down. The distance from his hoof to his heart looked about right. I aimed for his hoof and fired. I hit him right in the heart. Now the fun really started. I had to go get him. The fellow gave me permission, had a canoe. We secured the canoe and took it to the river. We then paddled to the other side. The deer was laying on a ledge about 1 foot wide. It was some balancing act. The ledge was also about even with the top of the canoe. We carefully kept 1 foot in the canoe and the other on the ledge. Then we slowly picked up the deer by the legs and eased it into the canoe. Then we gently got fully back in too. What made it even more interesting was the river wanted to move us downstream too. After getting back to safety, I tagged and gutted the deer. As it turned out, that's the only deer I ever got while hunting. That was December 1976. Our mom passed away on December 1st, the first day of the season. I went hunting to fill the wait time between viewings. My wife's dad passed away 14 days later. Kind of a tough year. Mixed memories for sure. When we got divorced, the Domestic Relations Board, all women, left me with just $40 a week. I had to sell my guns to get a bit more available. I sold the Model 70 and my Remington 1100 shotgun. I loved hunting pheasants and ducks. I never missed with the 1100. When I did, old Duke gave me a dirty look. Now they cost 5 times what my original did. I'm in too crappy a shape to hunt anymore. There was a progression I went through. I hunted everything when I was young. Then I focused on ducks and geese. Finally, I got as much enjoyment out of videotaping. My equipment is obsolete. Maybe one of these days I'll pick up a decent camera again. Until then, be safe when you're outdoors. As always, I wish everyone all the best.